Well, if you have not listened to what I believe could be one of the most important interviews ever done in this nation's history, you have to do it. You've got to run at some point today, not right now, because we are going to catch you up on the highlights here on KCMO. You have got to run to listen to the interview last night that Bret Baier did on Fox News with Elon Musk and his staffers at DOGE. It is unbelievable. First off, you get an insight into who these people are. You get an insight into the seriousness that these people are approaching this job with. And it becomes very obvious and very evident that the people in charge, the people who are involved right now in trying to clean up government waste, are some of the most valuable people from the American business world that you could possibly imagine doing something like this. And the dirty little secret here is everybody who's got a pulse, anyone who's got a functioning brain and isn't going to be hyper partisan for a second, knows that this needs to be done. It's about a half-hour interview. It was tremendous last night, and it made me realize these are the people that might end up saving this country financially and fiscally. Now, of course, Congress is going to have a lot of work to do. DOGE cannot do it all on its own. And that's going to be on the Republicans to get to work and get to work very quickly on helping DOGE clean up some of the mess. But it was tremendous when you look at the waste, the fraud, the abuse, and the seriousness of some of the people involved on this DOGE committee. You realize that these are impressive people. Joe Gebbia was part of this sit down last night with Bret Baier. Now, this guy is the founder of Airbnb. He's not exactly a slouch in the business world, okay? He's a top entrepreneur in this country. He's done a tremendous job building an incredible net worth. He's worth $8 billion at 43 years old. You tell me, who do you want? Who do you trust? You trust Emmanuel Cleaver in Kansas City or Sharice Davids, who couldn't find their way out of a paper bag? Or are you trusting the guy who's worth $8 billion at 43 years old because he's a founder of Airbnb? He's been on the board of Tesla. He's a minority stakeholder in the San Antonio Spurs. He's the co-founder of Samara, an accessory dwelling unit startup. And now he is a member of DOGE. These are the people that we want fixing our government. Not the losers and the hucksters who couldn't make a dollar until they found themselves with a little bit of political power in Washington, D.C., and suddenly their net worth goes from nothing to 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million. They don't create anything. They don't do anything that is useful to the private sector. They simply grift. These people are the opposite of grifters. Here's Joe Gebbia, Airbnb founder, talking about his role in DOGE last night on Fox News.
And they told me something about a mine that was dealt with retirement. And they said they needed somebody to help out to fix retirement in the government. I loved the challenge, so I jumped on board. And it turns out there is actually a mine in Pennsylvania that houses every paper document for the retirement process in the government. Now, picture this. This giant cave has 22,000 filing cabinets, stacked 10 high to house 400 million pieces of paper. It's a process that started in the 1950s and largely hasn't changed in the last 70 years. And so as we dug into it, we found retirement cases that had so much paper, they had to fit it on a shipping pallet. So the process takes many months, and we're going to make it just many days.
Will it be digitized or how?
Absolutely. So this will be an online digital process that will take just a few days at most. And I really think, it's an injustice to civil servants who are subjected to these processes that are older than the age of half the people watching your show tonight. So we really believe that the government can have an Apple Store-like experience, beautifully designed, great user experience, modern systems.
How can you hate that? I'm going to let that sit for a second here at 6:09 on a Friday morning. What makes you hear that and say to yourself, oh, time to go burn another Cybertruck at the local dealership on State Line Road? How do you listen to somebody make that statement? Giving back to their country. This guy's worth $8 billion. He's 43 years old. There's a million things he could do with his life. He's doing this on behalf of this country, on behalf of all of us in Kansas City, Republicans and Democrats and independents and liberals and conservatives. He's doing that for all of us, on behalf of all of us. Now, are there things that DOGE is going to screw up? Are there things that they could do better, more efficiently, communicate better? Absolutely. But you have a legacy media establishment that is against them at every single turn. You have an entire political party that anything they do is going to be the worst thing that ever happened to the United States of America. It's very hard to combat some of that. It's very hard to push back on some of that when you're getting hit at every turn. But when you actually listen to these people talk about what they're doing, you put a face to these individuals, like we could do last night with this interview with Bret Baier on Fox News. You realize we need more individuals like Joe Gebbia, not less. We need less Cleavers, less Davids, less Schumers. You could say the same for Republicans, too. They've been wasting money for 30 years. Where have they been on this issue? Nowhere. I mean, they talk a good game when they're out of power. They've had plenty of power over the last generation. What have they done with it? How have they solved or fixed any of this? They haven't either. So put the blame on them as well. I'm happy to do that. But we actually have now some adults in the room who are like, you guys are a mess. If this was a private company, it'd be bankrupt, a dozen times over, and everybody would be looking at each other in the boardroom, blaming each other, pointing the finger at somebody else. That's what would be happening here. And then Elon brought this up. He brought up how there was a survey that cost $1 billion. And the survey, well, it's not even clear what it was for or what it did. And he thinks it could have been a $10,000 survey on surveymonkey.com.
For you, what's the most astonishing thing you've found out in this process?
The sheer amount of waste and fraud in the government. It is astonishing. It's mind-blowing. We routinely encounter wastes of $1 billion or more, casually. For example, like the simple survey that was literally 10-question survey that you could do with SurveyMonkey, cost you about $10,000. The government was being charged almost $1 billion for that.
For just the survey?
$1 billion for a simple online survey. Do you like the national park? And then there appeared to be no feedback loop for what would be done with that survey. So the survey would just go into nothing.
Yeah, that gets you fired in the private sector. Not that many companies can spend $1 billion on a survey anyway. But that is the most government thing I've ever heard. Spend $1 billion on a survey, a bunch of people get rich. It produces nothing of consequence, nothing of substance. Nobody can even define what it was for. And it's like, well, there goes $1 billion, John.
Yeah, remember that time they said, hey, if you're feeling any side effects from a vaccination, give us a call.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah, they didn't want that information. That was going nowhere.
That was going nowhere. Just like this $1 billion survey was going nowhere outside of making some people rich. That's all it did. Didn't produce anything for the taxpayer. And that's the conclusion I can't help but come to. If you are against any of this, you've been in on the grift. You've been in on the government charades in some way, shape, or form. And you are scared to death about the possibility that maybe you, your friends, your colleagues will get busted in the process. What other conclusion am I supposed to come to based on those two clips on these DOGE people who sat down last night with Bret Baier and sounded beyond reasonable, sounded very much apolitical? It's not about hurting one political party over the other. It's not the goal here. Obviously, they've been appointed by a Republican president to do this job, but none of this stuff is political. Unless you're part of some operation that has gotten very wealthy from NGOs and wasteful government spending that nobody can track and nobody has been willing to track. It just goes into a black hole, and the taxpayer is supposed to be like, oh, too bad. $36 trillion in debt. I don't feel it anyway. I'm just getting by day to day. I'm not going to worry about this. And then they try to get their base all wrapped up and worked up over this. And it's working with some of them. I'm not sure it's working as well as they think it is. 913-408-7957. If you didn't see the interview, we'll share it on X and social media later this morning, but we will have a lot of clips from this as well to get to on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Plus, we've got changes at City Hall we've got to address this morning here on KCMO. Big news dropped yesterday right around lunchtime. Brian Platt fired as city manager in Kansas City, Missouri. It didn't come as a surprise. It was not a shock, but it was the wrong decision by the city of Kansas City, Missouri. So it was a 13-0 vote. They went into a closed session yesterday, and I was actually, of course, out at the K yesterday for opening day. We had a great show with owner John Sherman on talking about the stadium future. Mayor Lucas was on as well, and we'll dive into more of that throughout the morning. But right after that, I went over to Kansas City PBS to record Week in Review with Nick Haynes, who is going to be on this morning at 7:30. And, I took Stadium Drive all the way up to 31st Street, and then that took me right down to their office building. And I'll tell you what, man, you want to talk about fixing some potholes, fixing some roads? How about Stadium Drive going north to 31st Street? My goodness. I feel like my car's going to need a tune-up after that 2-mile trip up the road. Wow. That was brutal. But neither here nor there. I get to PBS, and it broke right before we started recording that Brian Platt was out in a 13-0 vote. Now, this, of course, stems from the lawsuit that was settled with, or I shouldn't say settled, it was not settled. They went to court, and what happened is former communications employee Chris Hernandez got a near $1 million settlement out of this because he claims that Brian Platt told him to lie to the media. And the mayor and the city council highlighted that as one of the main reasons for why they got rid of Brian Platt and why they elected to remove him as city manager. And, they talked about how they've lost confidence, the staff had lost confidence, and that they unanimously agreed to move on. Now, what I actually think happened behind closed doors, and I can't get anybody to budge on this, so I'm not sharing this with any insight. I'm just guessing that there are people having talked to members on the city council who would have kept Brian Platt, but there was probably some arm twisting behind closed doors where it was made clear, guys, it is in the best interests of all of us to make this decision unanimous. If it's 9-4, 10-3, I don't know if that's the best move. Now, the other problem is some of the people that you might have relied on to tell those on the city council who want Brian Platt out to go pound sand are not going to be the ones who are going to stand up with a really strong backbone in a moment like this when the Platt situation has become racial in many respects. You've got the Urban League and many in the urban core who have called for Brian Platt to be removed. They saw this as their opportunity. They saw this chance to get another scalp, and sadly, they got their scalp. And you know and I know that now the goal is going to be to hire somebody that fits a DEI quota. They will claim that's not what's happening. They will talk all about how this is just finding the best person for the job. I don't believe it for a second. Don't forget, we shared this, and I don't believe the Kansas City Star did anything with this, even though I know for a fact that they had this email. But there was an email that was sent from Melissa Robinson back in October of 2020 saying that she was very upset that the new city manager, who at the time was Brian Platt, he had just been hired in late 2020, was not a black female. And her email, I have the email in front of me, and I know other media in Kansas City have the same email. I have the email that reads from Melissa Robinson, still on the city council, 3rd District, writing here, going from a commitment to seeing a black female city manager to choosing a white male is unconscionable. If you said this about any other race in any other direction, the Kansas City Star would have a front page story on you for 2 weeks straight. And that would be just the warm-up act. And I know that other people in Kansas City media have the same email I have of Melissa Robinson basically expressing her disappointment that the city manager that they hired is a white guy. Now, that's not the reason I'm defending Brian Platt. You know, Brian Platt's not like some diehard Republican MAGA man or anything like that. That's not who he is. I don't know him that well. I respect him. I think he has done an overall good job in the role that he has been asked to do as city manager, which is basically potholes, streetlights, trash pickup, and snow removal. He doesn't run the police department. He's not in charge of the schools. So from that standpoint, all he's really, not all, but his main roles are just those basic city services. And then, of course, working with the development community. But when you see something that's inherently wrong, if you don't call it out, especially when other media is afraid to call it out, then what's the point of having the microphone? What's the point in doing any of this? So this was their opportunity. For those who had not liked Brian Platt's hiring going back 4.5 years, this was their opportunity. And here's the problem. For all the people being like, oh, man, you know, he cost us $1 million on this lawsuit settlement. Well, guess what? You're going to have to pay him $1 million probably. Maybe it's not quite that much, but you think the guy's just going to be like, all right, I'll go find another job. No, he's going to sue the city and get his too. You know that, and I know that.
And he turned down Austin last year, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. He stayed here. He got a raise. They're paying him $308,000 to do the job. You think he's just going to be like, all right, I think I'll skip town now. See you guys later. He's going to get his. That's not good for the city. City's going to be dragged through the mud further. And you know that he's got to know where some of these bodies are buried. So he's got some leverage here, which is not good for anybody. Most importantly, the taxpayer. But politics, I believe, is what made people fold yesterday. News in 2 minutes on KCMO. Coming up, some actual good media coverage in this town. I'll share with you next. It is proof that the clock is right twice a day. The blind squirrel can occasionally find the nut. And that is exactly what happened with this Channel 41 KSHB story that John Anthony actually sent my way last night. We were texting about it. Over 400 Kansas City, Missouri municipal court prisoners were released early over a near 4-year period, according to an investigation from the KSHB Woke 41 investigative team. Wow. What is going on?
Talk about a bombshell.
What is going on here? Wait, what kind of investigation is this from Woke 41? I am blown away that they would do this kind of research. I appreciate them doing it. It was a well-done investigative piece, and it signals one of the main problems that we've had in this town for far too long. You talk to any cop in Kansas City, and they will tell you that way too often they find themselves arresting the same people over and over and over again. Another 84 prisoners were released early against judges' orders, according to the Channel 41 piece here. And they did a sit-down interview with the mayor of Kansas City, Quentin Lucas, about this. And they talked about some of these examples of individuals who have just gotten arrested, in some cases, dozens of times. And here's part of that Channel 41 package and what that sounded like last night.
So here's one example of an individual who's had 34 cases in Kansas City alone. Now we're showing you his mugshot here because in most of these cases, he's been convicted.
I love how they're like, I'm sorry we're showing the mugshot, but here's why we're showing the mugshot.
Breaking our own rule.
I know. They made these dumb rules during 2020. We're not going to show mugshots anymore because, well, it's racist to show the mugshots of people. No, it's not. Show the mugshot. So they explain why they're showing the mugshot. So they still are living up to the Woke 41 standards. But to their credit, they are at least once again covering this story.
Philip Moore was most recently taken into custody after allegedly punching 2 security guards in the face at a bus stop, even knocking one man's tooth out. And he's just one example of someone with mental health issues who's...
By the way, was that your tooth, Mark, that you lost a few weeks ago, or no? He didn't knock your tooth out, did he?
No.
Okay.
No, I had a professional help.
Oh, that's right. Okay. All right. I'm just making sure. Mark lost a tooth a few weeks ago. He had to take a day off, so just making sure it wasn't this guy Philip in a bus stop downtown Kansas City. All right, let's continue.
Being released early from jail, only to appear in front of the same judge days later. I've been in the courtroom for this case. I've talked with several people, and tonight I'm sharing their voices. A judge and a Kansas City officer who've seen this issue firsthand, and the mayor, who acknowledged, unfortunately, this isn't an isolated case. How do you explain to the public why this is happening?
So we share the viewpoint with the public that it is wholly unacceptable. We try our level best to make sure that those who need to be incarcerated, who have been adjudicated by a judge to be a threat to themselves, a partner, or our community, are incarcerated. The challenge comes down to the space that we have right now. We are renting from counties throughout western Missouri.
So that is true, and of course the jail is going to be built, but it's not going to happen overnight. But yes, Kansas City has been using jails in Vernon County and in Johnson County, Missouri, to house some of these inmates. That's not the only problem. You've got problems in the prosecutor's office. Now, I will give the current prosecutor, Melissa Johnson, the benefit of the doubt and say that as the new Jackson County prosecutor, she cannot be worse than Jean Peters Baker. She can only take that office in one direction, and that's up. You have an issue with judges who also can be soft on crime. You have an issue of jail space. You have an issue when it comes to trust between law enforcement and the prosecutor's office and judges in this town, where they will not be as proactive as they might otherwise be. So it is not one of these things. It is all of these things put together that has caused this city to deal with, obviously, record years for violent crime. Now, there was, of course, a dip in 2024 that is welcomed, but, I'm going to wait to see how it plays out in 2025 before I say things are definitely trending in the right direction. Here's the problem. The problem is, as much as I appreciate Channel 41 doing a piece like this, they were one of the faces 4 to 5 years ago of, the defund the police, soft on crime attitude that permeated this town. And it's not like they were doing packages on rah-rah defund the police. It's more about, cozying up to certain people, cozying up to certain groups, and cozying up to certain narratives, which they were not afraid to do. Hence the moniker I gave them, Woke 41. Now, I will say yesterday I did happen to meet, they came up and introduced themselves, some of the morning show from 41. And, they're very pleasant. I think most of this stuff usually comes from the top down. It's not a bottom-up thing in terms of the ideology of any television station or newsroom. So, I can be pleasant to anybody and respect the job that they're trying to do. But I also can see through the charade and see the politics of what any station, any network is trying to do. And you can as well. It's evident to anybody who's watching for 2 minutes what's going on here. So now they're trying to backtrack, it seems like, on some of the things that at the very least they were sympathetic towards just a couple of years ago. And those policies impacted Kansas City for the worse. And it also impacted surrounding communities. It's one of the things that we talked about on the show for a long time, which is you may not live in Kansas City. You may not be a KCMO resident, but I promise you, you will feel the impacts of the crime situation getting out of control. Whether it's the Super Bowl parade rally, whether it's not wanting to go to certain parts of downtown at certain times of day because who knows who's going to get held up at gunpoint. We had a couple of radio hosts, or one radio host in Kansas City, deal with that about a month ago. So there are a lot of problems. You've got some of these criminals spilling into adjacent communities as well. That's happening as they get emboldened. So all these things impact us as a region. It's not specific to Kansas City, Missouri, and it never has been. 913-408-7957, our text line and our studio line on KCMO Talk Radio. So that is something that I will give them credit for covering, but I will not let them whitewash history on it either. No way. Meantime, yesterday, we did have on John Sherman, owner of the Kansas City Royals. And if you missed the interview, it is up on the podcast page at Pete Mundo. Just search it, Apple, Spotify, subscribe to the podcast. You can find all the interviews from yesterday there. J.J. Piccolo, John Sherman, and other folks involved with the organization. But obviously, so much focus with John Sherman in particular on where he wants this team to be. I still believe in his heart he is looking at a Kansas City, Missouri location, whether that's downtown, whether that's Washington Square Park. Those two would obviously be the front runners right now on that side of the state line. But it is also clear that he's got a deadline here coming up of late June, and here's why.
I think when Kansas got into the mix here after the vote, they have a June 30 deadline for that star bond legislation. Yes. So that's actually helped us create a deadline. But that's certainly an objective, and it's an objective for our potential partners as well.
Now, one thing that was not noted there is that the Kansas legislature could vote to basically extend the star bond offer one more year. I know none of us want this can to get kicked down the road even further, but I'm just throwing it out there that the legislature could say, the Royals technically have until June 30th of this year to accept our star bond proposal. However, we'll give them another 12 months to think about it, which I know would send some people nuts in this town. That can very much happen, Mark.
If they want to build by 2031, they got to get started soon, though.
Well,
right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't think they can wait a whole lot longer beyond maybe next spring. Probably would take them at least a couple of years to get that thing up and running, at least a couple of years. But you're right about that. Time is no longer on their side. So John Sherman now has this self-imposed deadline in his own mind. But the curveball could be the Kansas legislature saying, hey, John, you guys need a little more time to think about it. We're here for you. We got you covered. I know that would send a lot of us nuts, but do not think that timeline cannot change, because it's only changed about half a dozen times over the last year and a half throughout this entire process. You know who needs a DOGE? The KCATA. Can we get a DOGE on those goobers? Frank White III, can we get a DOGE on his operation there at the KCATA? My gosh. The people crying poor at the KCATA, it is just comical and just patently absurd that they're going around the local media in this town crying about how, I guess layoffs are coming, bus routes will be cut, services will be diminished, because we will not get every penny that we have demanded from the city this year, John.
And yet the city had them budgeted for a certain amount and then gave them more.
Yep.
And then it's not enough.
It's never enough. It is never enough. Oh, my goodness. It's just infuriating. Because you sit here and you watch these agencies waste money left and right. No one is held accountable for it. And all they do is say, give us more money. And if you don't give us more money, of course, what's the first thing they cut? Essential services. They screw the taxpayer, the person who's actually in the end footing the bill. That's what, if they do not get every single thing they demand, it's the same thing with the teachers' unions. I guess we can't pay to have teachers and pencils in the classrooms. Wait, do you need the 7 assistant principals? No, don't you talk about that. Guess we're out of teachers. Can't teach the kids anymore. No paper in the classroom. Ah, boy. But you still need the 7 assistant principals all clearing $120,000. You still need, really? You sure about that? Oh, okay. I see how this is. So the KCATA requested a budget of $117 million. That was their original request. Now, just to be clear, that is about a 40% increase from where it was just a few years ago. You look at the KCATA budget, and for most of the 2010s, it was between $75 and $85 million. Now, I know inflation's a thing. I know inflation has been real the last few years, but it has not been 40%. It's been 20%, as we've talked about. So even if you want to give them the benefit of the doubt here and say, hey, inflation happened the last few years. Boy, I wonder why. But inflation happened the last few years, and their budget has gone up 20%. That does not account for the 40% ask, 40% increase ask that they have put out there to the city of Kansas City, Missouri. So now they're not getting that. And they're running all over town, talking to local reporters, in this case, Channel 41, and they are saying, oh, man, I guess we're going to have to go ahead and reduce service frequency and lay off some employees to deal with the budget crunch. Why is your first answer laying off employees? Because it's not actually the answer, but it's the answer that they think they can draw sympathy from in media and with the public, and they think that they can pressure the city because it will make them look bad, meaning the city look bad in the eyes of the public. So that's why they're going down that road. They're not saying, fine, we'll take what we got. Let's figure out how to make sure we're running the most efficient routes and we're keeping all our people employed. They never say that. It's always about how you will get screwed to then create some kind of public outrage over the situation. That's the name of the game here. And the KCATA has stated that even with their $77.8 million from the city council in the upcoming year's budget, that is not going to come close to what they need, since they have asked for $117 million. It is absolutely absurd. But they're playing a political game here is what they're doing. And that's why we need DOGE. We need KCATA DOGE to get in there and figure out where there might be some wasteful spending. You can't tell me there isn't any. And, would you consider bringing back bus fares, by the way? We talked about this, and I'll have Nick Haynes on coming up in 20 minutes, Kansas City PBS. This was a topic that will be discussed tonight at 7:30 on Week in Review. And as I alluded to, the KCATA has cost itself millions of dollars by having this free bus fare. A couple of things have happened because of that. Less revenue and also worse service. Now, I'm not going to sit here and BS you. I never have. I don't ride the bus in this town. I know it's going to shock you. I know that will surprise you.
Talk about a bombshell.
I'm not riding I do not ride the bus. Okay, so we'll get that out of the way first and foremost. But I do have the numbers, and the numbers are clear. The ridership for the buses have not reached the numbers they were at pre-COVID. So free bus fare led to worse service, has led to obviously issues on the buses, and it has not resulted in more people taking advantage of this supposedly free, air quote, service. We know there's no free lunch, but it hasn't even resulted in the intended goal. So you've hurt your revenues, and less people want to actually consume your product. If that was the private sector, you'd be like, boy, we got a problem on our hands. Revenues are down and less people are using our product. What should we do? How can we fix this? But in government, you just come to the conclusion of, well, I guess we need more money. No, you don't. No, you really don't. You don't need more money. So get DOGE on it, and I hope that the city council stands firm on this deal and does not allow itself to fold to the KCATA, who now is using local media to try to bully themselves into more money from the city budget. Now, with that, speaking of DOGE, last night, an incredible interview went down on Fox News with Bret Baier. Bret Baier interviewed Elon Musk and some of the brains behind DOGE. And these are incredibly serious individuals. These are people who are billionaire entrepreneurs. They're exactly the kind of people you would want trying to clean up a bloated bureaucracy. And they're not there because, they're hyper-partisan MAGA people. They're just people trying to give back to their country. And here's a little clip of that. If you missed it, it was about a half hour last night with Bret Baier. It may be one of the most important interviews in this country's history. At an incredibly important time in this country's history when you talk about $36 trillion in debt. and take a listen to one of these guys, Brad Smith and Elon Musk, talking about how they want to make sure that money that the government gives to universities for things like cancer research is actually being used for the intended consequence of curing cancer.
Well, I'd say there's a couple of things we're really committed to in our work at HHS. Number one, making sure we continue to have the best biomedical research in the world. And number two, making sure, which President Trump has said over and over again, that we 100% protect Medicare and Medicaid. But there's a lot of opportunity. So if I take NIH as an example, today, if you're an NIH researcher and you get a $100 grant at your university, today you get to spend 60 of that and your university spends 40 of that. The policy that we're proposing to make is that you get to spend 85 of that and your university spends 15. So that's more money going directly to the scientists who are discovering new cures. Another example at NIH is today they have 27 different centers. They got created over time by Congress, and they're typically by disease state or body system. There's 700 different IT systems today at NIH.
700 different IT systems.
IT software systems.
They
can't speak to each other.
So they don't talk to one another.
They have 27 different CIOs. And so when you think about making great medical discoveries, you have to connect the data.
Time out. You said 27 different chief information officers?
Correct.
And most of them are non-technical.
So there's a lot there.
There's a lot of opportunity. It will make science better, not worse.
Tell me how you're possibly against that intended goal. 700 IT systems inside of the HHS that do not communicate. 27 chief information officers. And we've got serious people. In the case of that first voice, Brad Smith, you heard Elon Musk on the back end of that. Brad Smith is a highly successful healthcare entrepreneur. He is someone who is now serving, of course, as part of DOGE. He's specifically looking at HHS. Why would you not want to make that process more efficient? 27 CIOs and 700 different IT systems that do not communicate with each other? Unless your goal is to have a clunky system to then hire more people, to create more government employees and government workers, to prop up the bureaucracy, how could you not get behind that? If you spent a minute in the private sector in your entire life, how could you not get behind that? And those are the things that I would be fascinated by if you looked at the KCATA, if you looked at just the Kansas City budget as a whole, the entire government. I'm not saying you would find this level of incompetency. Might come close, but I'm not sure you would get quite there because the federal government is such an oversized, bloated mess. But I'm sure you would find things like this where anybody who spent time in some of these private sector tech spaces would say, what are you guys doing here? And let me help you make this better for the taxpayer who you're supposed to be working on behalf of. They're not working for you. You're working for them. Let's make this better for everybody. Because then you have more money for potholes. You have more money for streetlights and trash removal and snow removal and things like that. You have more money when you clean up the mess. And that's the other end goal here that is being lost in the entire conversation. We had a great time out at Kauffman Stadium yesterday. I know the Royals lost their home opener yesterday, a 7-4 in 10 innings, but it's a long season. It's one of 162, as the old cliche goes. And obviously, there still is a lot of runway for this team as they look to reach the playoffs for a second straight season, which has not been done since 2014 and 2015. I do want to share something with you that I got from somebody at the stadium yesterday, high up in the organization. It was not on the air. It was in a private conversation off the air. But if you're just a casual baseball fan, or if you're a diehard baseball fan, this will give you some insight into some of the issues that the sport is facing, and more importantly, how it could change the faces and the stars of the sport of baseball. So in Major League Baseball, especially if you're a team like the Royals, what do you have to do to win? You have to draft really well. You're not going to sign free agents to $500 million deals like the Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets. You got to just draft the right guys, develop them, and then try to lock them into long-term deals at somewhat of a discount like Bobby Witt. It's what you have to do to win. You got no choice. So if you want to develop guys from, let's say, high school or college into the major leagues, you want to get guys when they're maybe 19, 20, 21 years old, because you know they're going to need development in the minor leagues. And then you want them to have a solid 7, 8, 9, 10-year career, ideally. Well, what's happening right now, and this is what was shared with me yesterday, in college baseball, you've got this NIL money, this name, image, likeness money impacting college baseball, which I didn't realize was happening at this kind of scale. But you've got college baseball players making more money than they can make by getting drafted to the major leagues and spending a few years in the minors. Now, a lot of minor league players don't make any money, but if you're a top pick, you can get a multi-million-dollar signing bonus, right? You can still make money on the front end with a big signing bonus. Well, now you're put in a situation where, yeah, you could get drafted to the pros, but you could be like, you know what? I'll play one more year of college baseball and make $500,000 or $1 million doing it if you're a top player. And now with the junior college rules, where junior college doesn't count against your college enrollment, you could play like 6, 7 years of college sports now. And you're in college playing sports until you're 24, 25 years old. And let's be honest, these guys, these teams do not want to draft players at 24, 25 years old. What are you going to bring them up to the big leagues at 27, 28 when they got 5 years left? So what's going to happen then? What's going to potentially happen is there will be more of a Latin American influence in baseball. Those guys want to get out of their third world countries and they want to make money and try to make the major leagues. They'll come to play in the minors at 17, 18, 19 years old. They'll develop. They'll be in the big leagues. And there's nothing wrong with that, but let's be honest. One of the big problems for the NBA right now is too many of their superstars are Eastern European guys no one knows, and you can't pronounce their names. Same thing is true to a lesser extent in Major League Baseball. You want homegrown stars. It's why the NFL is such a success. It's a overlooked part of the NFL's success that you watch a lot of the stars in college football for 3-4 years. You don't get that nearly as much in the NBA anymore because these guys are all from Eastern Europe, it seems like. And you're getting less of it in Major League Baseball as well. So how you grow homegrown stars will help determine the success of your leagues. And baseball's got this major issue bubbling that will impact stars in the sport for years to come.